Yo, what's up guys, it's your boy Sami here. Today we are gonna see, what if Fem Itachi is possessive of Naruto, part 3. Hope you'll enjoy this video. So before we start, please subscribe to our channel, and like this video. So let's get into the video. In the forests of Fire Country, a small infant cried into the night. It looked frail, even by the standards of most children straight out of the womb, with its pale skin making it appear near death. Its position in the grass of the forest was likely an uncomfortable one, which was probably the reason for its tears. Out of the blue, several men appeared before the crying infant, all of whom had the same pale, almost lavender-colored eyes. They each looked down at the crying baby, as if it were some strange animal they had never seen before. At the front of this group was an individual of middle age, with long brown hair and a stern face. His arms were crossed, as he looked down at the weeping child. "I can only assume this is the child you were referring to," the man asked, looking over his shoulder to one of the men behind him. The man in question nodded. "Yes, Lord Hiashi," he said. "He bears the eyes of our clan." Almost as if prompted to do so by the man's words, the infant opened its eyes. Everyone who already hadn't seen the infant found themselves shocked, hardly believing that this strange-looking pale-skinned white-haired child possessed the bloodline of the Hyuga clan. Who in the world could this be? When asked out loud, though the question was mostly rhetorical, one of the other men offered an explanation. "Perhaps he is a bastard," he proposed. "Someone in our clan must have fornicated with an outsider, resulting in a pregnancy, and they then left the child to die in the woods out of shame for their actions." Hiashi was unconvinced, and yet, other than the child's eyes, it shares none of the other physical features commonly found within our clan, he countered before activating his Byakugan. This was when he truly became shocked. This infant had some of the most potent chakra he had ever seen in his entire life. As a man who had lived to know the third Hokage, all three of the legendary Sannin, as well as the Yellow Flash, to see someone that had this kind of chakra seemed like something out of a dream. This boy was no Hyuga, that was for sure. He was something far, far different. Regardless, he is an abandoned child who possesses our eyes, Hiashi continued. He will live among us. Otherwise, the secrets of ours would be revealed to the world. The others could only nod in agreement. Whether they liked it or not, they weren't presented with many other options. Age 4. His name was Toneri. He didn't remember anyone giving him such a name, and was told that it was actually assigned to him after it just so happened to be his first word. It must have been rare for a child's first word to subsequently become their name. How many children could boast that? Toneri had lived a strange life thus far, at least when he compared his circumstances to those of the other children in the clan. From his first memories, it was made abundantly clear to him that he was not an actual Hyuga, and that he was just a ward of the clan. He wasn't allowed to speak to members of the main family unless spoken to first, and even the members of the branch family had a higher position in the clan than he did. He was, after all, an outsider. Currently, he found himself scrubbing the floors of Lord Hiashi's private manor. These were his typical duties. He cleaned after the main family, run errands for them, etc. He was essentially a servant that wasn't paid. Nevertheless, he didn't complain, for he was simply grateful to have a home at all. As he worked diligently to make sure that the floor underneath him was spotless, he heard the sounds of footsteps moving toward him. Looking over his shoulder, he saw several members of the main family walking by, and was quick to move out of their path. He bowed low, making sure not to show his face. Despite doing everything he was told he needed to do in their presence, it was clear that they still despised him. One even went as far as to kick the bucket of water he had been using to clean the floor, resulting in much of it getting on his clothes, drenching them. Even still, he didn't move or take any action against them, and stayed down until they finished walking by. "Well, that was a bit rude," Toneri remarked with a careless smile before getting up to retrieve more water. Age 5. Lord Hiashi had just been given his first child. It was something that was being discussed by many people throughout the clan. From what Toneri had heard, mostly from conversations he had not really been a part of, was that the child was a girl, and that she was named Hinata. In his eyes, Hinata would just be another person he would be forced to serve for the remainder of his existence. He honestly hoped that she wouldn't be as cruel as some of the other members of the main family, since he had little doubt he'd be forced to deal with her a lot in the future. Nevertheless, the birth of Hinata had made Toneri incredibly happy. Ever since the news broke that she was going to be born, Lord Hiashi had started acting differently. He was a much happier person, first off, to the point where he actually gave Toneri days off from his duties. It made him glad to see Lord Hiashi happy. Even though his life wasn't perfect, the fact that he even had a life at all was thanks to Lord Hiashi, who had been the one to decide that he be taken into the clan in the first place. If not for that decision, Toneri was smart enough to realize that he would have likely been killed. There was no way that the Hyuga clan would allow someone with the Byakugan to exist outside of their control. After making that thought, Toneri just finished the last of his duties for today. He then got to work, collected his cleaning equipment, and was about to return it to the storage closet before he was forced to stop in his tracks. The door at the end of the hall slid open, to reveal Lord Hiashi holding an infant girl wrapped in blankets. Toneri moved to the side and prepared to drop the cleaning equipment to the floor and bow, but was stopped by Lord Hiashi. "It is okay, child, you needn't bow," he was told, before Lord Hiashi smiled a bit. "Would you like to see my new daughter?" Toneri nodded, feeling that it would be foolish to say no. Lord Hiashi then tilted the bundle in his arms down a bit, so Toneri could see Hinata's face. She was a cute-looking baby if he was being honest, and he had to stop himself from poking her cheeks with curiosity. "She looks like her parents, Lord Hiashi," Toneri complimented. Hiashi smiled at the remark. "That she does," he said before continuing down the hallway. Toneri smiled. It felt good to be treated like a human being. Age 6. Toneri stood in silence, as he stared down at yet another defeated opponent. Despite not being a member of the clan, his skills as a combatant had been noticed quickly, so Lord Hiashi was training him in the ways of the gentle fist. It was a decision that was met with some controversy, as many viewed it as the secrets of their sacred fighting style being passed on to an outsider. Even if he was, in fact, an outsider, Toneri was as gifted a fighter as anyone in the clan. He was fast, incredibly so, and his Byakugan was noted to be particularly powerful, even when compared to the likes of Lord Hiashi. It only made much of the clan resent him even more, seeing that some outsider was actually more talented in the fighting style of the Hyuga than they were. After his prodigious talent in battle had been discovered, he had gone from being a servant of the clan, to now being a secret weapon. No longer was he scrubbing floors. Now, all he did was train, day and night until he dropped. Failure to give his best effort in training was met with immediate punishment, mostly involving a physical lashing. Despite the best efforts of many, the main family had been unable to place a curse seal upon his forehead. His body always reacted negatively to it, resulting in the seal failing to work before disappearing altogether. Because of this, the main family was unable to control him by causing pain by activating the seal, so they were forced to use more direct physical methods of abuse. "You are improving, child," Hiashi complimented, funny enough, being one of the few members of the clan that didn't outright despise him. "Thank you, Lord Hiashi," Toneri responded with his trademark smile. As they were speaking, the boy he had just defeated was being dragged away to receive medical attention. Out of all of Toneri's teachers, Lord Hiashi was the only one who never resorted to cruelty. He never belittled Toneri due to his status, and never caused him intentional physical pain. But most importantly, and the thing that honestly brought Toneri great joy, was the fact that he looked at him like he was an actual person, not like some disgusting insect. "You're progressing faster than expected," Lord Hiashi continued. "I'd already say that you're far above Genin level, so I propose to Hokage-sama that you be placed in an academy class that will be graduating next year." Toneri tilted his head. "Will I be able to make friends, Lord Hiashi?" he asked. Friends? Such a bond was a foreign concept to him. Hiashi nodded. "Of course, but the academy will need to go over your file before allowing you a place in class. This could take months. Until then, I want you to continue training. Do you understand?" "Yes, Lord Hiashi." Age 7. Toneri was standing at a distance, watching, as students funneled out of the academy's entrance, signaling that the day was finally over, and that class was being dismissed. Most took no notice of them, as they rushed out of the courtyard, excited to return home to where they would be able to lounge about, and do whatever they wanted. He would be entering class next week, and decided to visit early to gauge his fellow classmates a bit. Thus far, none were particularly impressive at all. Most of them were much older than him, about 12 years old to his 7, and even still he was utterly confident that he'd be able to defeat them. He remained unimpressed until he saw him. For most, it would be the blonde hair that they noticed first, or the cerulean blue eyes that reflected an intelligence far that of most any child. For Toneri, however, what he noticed first was the pull on his chakra. For whatever reason, he felt as if some invisible force was attempting to pull him toward this mysterious blonde boy. From what he could tell, the boy was probably the same age as him, which meant that he was also skilled and talented beyond his years. At his side was a girl of the same age, with fair skin, black hair, and onyx eyes. Still, it was the blonde who attracted the majority of his attention. He had hoped that the blonde would notice him as well, but he seemed more focused on getting back home. Toneri almost felt sad when he left his line of sight, so much so that he forgot that he could continue to look if he simply activated his Byakugan. His thoughts felt muddled, as he struggled to figure out what was going on. Never before had he felt his chakra pull him toward another person like that. The very idea of something like that happening seemed absolutely preposterous, so much so that he wondered if he was beginning to go crazy. "Who are you?" he muttered to himself, breathlessly. Deciding that the best way to find out would be to simply ask, Toneri ventured deep into the village to get some answers to his questions. It actually took several hours until he was actually satisfied with what he was told. Naruto Uzumaki, the honorable son of the 4th Hokage, and the ward of the Uchiha clan. Toneri smiled after mulling over the recently acquired information in his head. He had needed to ask around for quite a while before someone was actually willing to tell him what he wanted. It would make sense that someone with such incredible pedigree would be the person who attracted so much of his attention. For the first time in his life, Toneri felt truly content. Based on what he felt when he first saw Naruto, and after learning as much about him as he possibly could, he honestly felt a kinship with the blonde boy. They were both prodigies who lived among clans that considered them to be outsiders. It wasn't to say that their life experiences were exactly the same up to this point, but Naruto was the first person Toneri had ever heard of who he felt may possibly be able to understand him. Also at the forefront of his mind was that inexplicable pull he felt on his chakra when he had first been in Naruto's presence. For a while, he had been pondering what it could have possibly meant, and came to the conclusion that it must have signified that they were both connected somehow. He cursed himself for being too shocked to activate his Byakugan during the brief encounter, otherwise, he could have gotten a good look at Naruto's chakra, as well. He imagined that it would be powerful, perhaps even more so than his own. There was no way he'd feel such a connection to Naruto if the blonde had weak chakra. In fact, a part of him theorized that the very reason he felt connected to Naruto was due to the fact that they both had very similar chakra. As he walked through the village some more, he continued to learn about his new classmate. Apparently, Naruto wasn't just some ordinary prodigy. Even among those considered talented enough to be given that title, he still stood out as the best. A prime example of this was Izumi Uchiha, another student in his class. During any other year, she'd be the best student by far, but since she was in a class with Naruto, she placed second. "Who are you, Naruto Uzumaki?" he asked himself with a smile. He figured he'd be given many opportunities to learn, starting with his first day of class tomorrow. Naruto was strong, incredibly so. After having met him all those months ago, his interest had proven to be well placed, as the son of the fourth Hokage was shown to be a prodigy of unmatched skill. Initially, things had gotten off to a bit of a rough start, as he had crossed the line by following Naruto around without his permission. He had been warned to never do it again, and decided that doing, as he was told, was the best decision for now. After that, much to his glee, they were placed on the same team, along with an Inuzuka girl named Hana. This time, he had decided to give Naruto a bit more space, learning from last time that his new teammate was more of a solitary type. Nevertheless, he wasn't deterred. He would slowly push through Naruto's shell until the day arrived in which he could call him a friend. His first and only friend. Their sensei, Danzo, was a somewhat tricky individual to read. He showed absolutely no emotion, and rarely displayed any interest in what he was doing. He was a strict teacher, forcing them to do dangerous survival exercises in which they were often pitted against each other in battle. Naruto remained undefeated. Recently, he and Hana had been ordered by Danzo-sensei to fight Naruto, and it had resulted in yet another victory for the blonde Uzumaki. Even still, Toneri was not upset, not at all. The fight he had with Naruto that day was something that he replayed in his mind over and over, as he relished in every detail. He had been pushed to the brink and defeated. It wasn't like his spars with the Hyuga, in which he always won with relatively no difficulty. No, now he was challenged every single day, and had quickly learned what it felt like to lose. And you know what? Toneri found losing to be more enjoyable than winning, at least when it was by Naruto's hand. Hana. She was honestly rather weak in Toneri's opinion, but he didn't dislike her or anything. She was actually incredibly useful to the team due to her skills, as a medic and a tracker, so she could hardly be called useless. While her combat skills lacked behind her supplementary skills, Naruto and Toneri both made up for that with their own strength. Thinking back on these few months, Toneri felt so very grateful. No longer was he confined to the walls of the Hyuga clan. No longer was he continually forced to spend his days surrounded by people that treated him like dirt. No longer was he a low-life insect that one could step on without anyone batting an eye. He was Toneri, genin of Konohagakure no Sato, and member of Team 1. Naruto adjusted his backpack once more before continuing to navigate through the knee-high grass. His eyes were scanning around for something in particular, though he didn't seem to be in any rush. It was incredibly bright and sunny out, but the trees of the forest created an adequate amount of shade, and the cool breeze could only be described as soothing. It was the perfect day to go exploring. Eventually, after hours of searching, he found what he was searching for. It could only be described as a ruin, an old temple of sorts that apparently hadn't been seen by mortal eyes in quite some time. The roof looked caved in, and the pillars were either on the brink of collapsing or already wholly destroyed. After gazing at the temple for a bit, Naruto removed a book from his backpack, and began sifting through the pages until he stopped on the page he had marked with a folded corner. The Uzumaki clan's mask storage temple, he mumbled to himself. He looked back up to see a symbol of the Uzumaki clan featured prominently at the front of the building. He closed the book, placed it back in his bag, and slowly ascended the 7 steps to the entrance of the temple, doing his very best to make sure that he didn't damage anything, both for his own health and the sake of the historic structure. Looking up at the archway above him, it looked as if at any moment it could collapse. Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly. I never imagined it would be in such a state, he muttered to himself before continuing through the building's entrance. The doors were practically blown off the hinges, so it was easy enough to get in. Upon entering, he felt as if he was trespassed into some sort of time capsule, straight from the years of old. The building itself was designed in a manner reminiscent of the time of the warring clans, a period of history before the existence of the shinobi villages, in which everyone was constantly fighting for power and dominance. I suppose that even after all this time, not much has changed, Naruto thought to himself, thinking about the current state of the world. The legendary Hashirama Senju would likely be disappointed with how things had turned out after he put forth so much effort trying to create peace. The most interesting aspect of the room by far had to be the wall at the back, which was decorated with various masks mounted all over the wall. The bottom portion of the wall was painted with a crimson-red flame design that crept upward, just barely reaching the masks, giving a slightly ominous vibe. All the masks appear to be demonic in appearance, though their designs vary, he thought to himself, wondering what they could possibly be used for. What he could tell though, was that they weren't natural, there was something odd about them. His body then froze when he heard a voice behind him. This isn't the kind of place one would expect to find an 8-year-old. Though, I suppose you're not a normal brat, are you? Naruto swiveled around to see who it was, and was shocked to see someone that he recognized to be a legendary shinobi, one he knew particularly well. Master Jiraiya, Naruto greeted respectfully. The individual in question was a tall and well-built man in adulthood with fair skin. He had a wart on the left side of his nose, waist-length, spiky white hair tied in a ponytail, with 2 shoulder-length bangs framing his face, as well as red lines under his eyes which extended all the way to the bottom of his face. His attire consisted of a green short shirt kimono and matching pants. He also wore handguards, a black belt, traditional wooden sandals, and a red haori with 2 yellow circles on each side. Displayed prominently on his forehead was a horned forehead protector with the kanji for oil. Jiraiya sighed, as he looked down at Naruto. Geez kid, you're as polite as ever I see. Just like your old man. Pardon my asking, Master Jiraiya, but what brings you here to this place? Naruto asked, deciding to ignore the remark and get straight to the point. You? It didn't really come as a surprise, and now that he thought about it, it should have been his initial assumption. After the deaths of his parents, Jiraiya had been out traveling the world, mourning, and keeping the Hokage informed on any global developments. It was an important job, but one that kept him away from the village a lot of the time. Now that he was back, it made sense that he would come to see his student son. Have you seen Mito yet? Naruto asked. Jiraiya nodded. From a distance, yes, he responded. But that's actually the other reason why I'm here. Naruto didn't respond, deciding to wait patiently for Jiraiya to explain himself. Based on the expression he was seeing on the older man's face, he could tell that the conversation they were about to have would be a serious one. From what I can tell, you're going to be the one looking after her, Jiraiya continued, earning a clarifying nod from Naruto. Which means you're going to need to learn how to deal with Jinchuriki. Deal with Jinchuriki? Jiraiya crossed his arms and nodded. You'll need to learn how to make sure that the power sealed inside of her doesn't get out of control, he explained. In doing so, you'll be able to stop possible rampages or worse. Naruto's eyes narrowed. This had always been something that had nagged at the back of his mind. His sister contained one of the 9 Bijuu, the Kyuubi, who just so happened to be the most powerful by far. If for whatever reason, that power broke free from her seal, or the Kyuubi took over, how would he be able to stop it? How can I learn, Jiraiya-sensei? Naruto then asked, making Jiraiya smirk at now being addressed as a teacher. Well, those eyes of yours give you an incredible advantage over most others. If strong enough, they can be used to suppress the power of the Bijuu, though only to an extent, Jiraiya explained, not surprising Naruto at all with his knowledge of his Sharingan. It made sense that the Hokage would tell him. Naruto was beginning to get the hang of it. Through the use of Sharingan, you mean? He asked, making Jiraiya smirk. Smart kid, Jiraiya complimented before continuing. You're right, the Sharingan can be used to suppress the Bijuu due to its unique capabilities. However, there is something that you need to remember, something that applies most importantly to your situation. Naruto waited for him to continue. He was beginning to notice that Jiraiya was incredibly theatric, almost as if he were a showman. Even during a serious discussion, he always seemed to pause mid-explanation for dramatic effect. Naruto didn't really mind though, thinking that it just added to Jiraiya's charm. The more powerful the Bijuu, or the more chakra influencing the Jinchuriki, the more powerful you need to be to actually suppress its influence, Jiraiya continued, ominously. In the history of the shinobi world, there has only been a single individual capable of controlling the Kyuubi with his eyes. Naruto knew precisely who he was talking about, Madara Uchiha. So, that was the level he'd need to reach. That would be quite a challenge, to say the least. From what he could recall, there was only one person in recorded history that was stronger than Madara, and that was the first Hokage, Hashirama Senju himself. Did Jiraiya honestly expect him to reach such a level in so short a time? But thankfully, you won't be tangling with the full might of the unsealed Kyuubi, Jiraiya reassured. The seal Minato used keeps much of the Kyuubi's influence at bay, as it is, so unless it somehow manages to break free from the seal entirely, you won't have to worry about that. Naruto nodded. Does everything you've told me today apply to other Jinchuriki, as well, or just Mito? Jiraiya smiled, and Naruto could tell that he liked the question. Yes, but there is one exception to everything that I have just told you, he explained. A Jinchuriki that somehow manages to cooperate and work alongside their Bijuru is immune to any. Fighting a Jinchuriki that could work in perfect tandem with their Bijuru would probably be even more difficult than combating the individual Bijuru itself. Before now, Naruto was unaware that a Jinchuriki could master the power of their tailed beast. It put into perspective just how powerful certain people in the shinobi world were. Naruto frowned. I need to become stronger, he said, realizing that to protect Mito, his current rate of growth just wasn't enough. He then felt one of Jiraiya's hands placed firmly on his shoulder. That's what I'm here for, kid, he assured. Come to think of it, I've meant to teach you one your father would want you to have. Naruto smiled. To learn from the man who taught his father would be an incredible honor, and he'd be a fool to refuse. It would be different from training under Lord Fugaku and Danzo-sensei, who didn't really teach anything, preferring to just have him fight and figure things out. Jiraiya was someone who would pass actual knowledge onto him. It also helped that he fell closer to his deceased father by doing this. He nodded. I'll dedicate myself to your teachings, sensei. Seemingly happy with his new student's response, Jiraiya reached to grab something in his pocket and quickly tossed it to Naruto, who caught it with ease. To his surprise, it was a water balloon of all things. Upon looking at it for a moment, Naruto could only think to say one thing. You carry a water balloon in your pocket. Jiraiya became flustered. Just shut up, and place the balloon in the palm of your dominant hand. After Naruto did, as instructed, he continued. Good. Now burst it using only your chakra. Naruto tried to do as instructed, but merely felt the water become a bit disrupted in the balloon. It would seem that this would be more challenging to learn than most others. This may take you a while, so let's get out of this place before the roof caves in on top of our heads, Jiraiya proposed, looking up at the ceiling of the temple with trepidation. The news wasn't what Naruto had expected to receive by coming here. Nevertheless, he was excited for the challenge. A week later, when will you be leaving? Izumi asked calmly after skipping a stone across the river. It made it all the way to the other side before clattering among several of its brethren. Naruto, who was sitting at her side in a relaxed position, responded, tomorrow morning. Izumi frowned, but did her best to hide the expression. For whatever reason, Naruto had gotten it in his head that now was the best time to visit the ruins of his ancestral home, Uzushiogakure no Sato. Naruto had always been fascinated by historical structures and monuments, but until now that had never required him to leave the forest surrounding the village. Now, he wanted to travel alone all the way to the coast. It sounds dangerous, she commented, doing her best to not let her worry show. It's a long trip to make on your own. Naruto looked at her from the corner of his eye. This is something that I need to do, Izumi, he explained. And it would be better to do it before we're dragged into yet another war. Even if part of what he said made sense, she still felt that he was leaving himself vulnerable to an attack by leaving the village on his own. She would offer to travel with him, but she just so happened to be embarking on a mission of her own during that time. She and her team had been chosen to be the ceremonial guards of the Fire Daimyo during his annual trip to Konoha. It was a great honor, and a testament to their achievements, as a team. In the end, Izumi acknowledged that there would simply be no convincing him otherwise, so she decided that she would just try to enjoy this time together, before they both had to leave. Have you learned anything of value from Master Jiraiya? She asked, shifting the topic of conversation elsewhere. Naruto hummed in response, yes, various things that will prove to be useful in the future, as well as information I was unaware I needed. It didn't seem as if Naruto was in the mood to go into too much detail, so Izumi decided to remain silent for a moment and enjoy her view of the water. This had always been her special place to go and think, and recently, she had managed to convince Naruto to come with her, as well. They rarely spoke during these times together, but in her opinion, that was what made it so special. Words weren't needed between them. Hours passed, and the sun finally began to set. She subtly gazed at Naruto's face, as it was illuminated by the light of the slowly disappearing sun, and couldn't help but acknowledge just how attractive of a person he actually was. She also just so happened to be privy to the fact that he was even more beautiful on the inside. We should begin heading home soon, he announced before standing up and stretching his body. Izumi nodded, though she was a bit disappointed that the moment was ending. She stood to her feet and brushed any of the dirt that clung to her pants. Naruto waited for her to stand at his side before they began the walk home, and, as usual, they hardly spoke, minus the occasional question from her. Still, she'd be content to stand in silence at his side for the remainder of her days, for there was no more comfortable feeling in this world. And whenever he did decide to speak, it was never pointless chatter. No, he was the person who would always tell her whatever she needed to hear. He was honest, kind, skilled, powerful, and quite frankly, the most interesting person in the whole world. It just so happened that the most interesting person in the world rarely spoke. But still, the greatest things in life were often the rarest. A few days later, Naruto admired the night sky, as it reflected off the water of the coastline. Littered throughout the endless expanse of black nothingness were tiny specks of light, stars, which in reality were larger in size than anything he could possibly imagine, even more so than the moon itself, which seemed so huge by comparison. It really put into perspective just how vast the universe was, that there existed anomalies so massive and bright that they could be seen from light years away. His moment of contemplation was interrupted when he heard what could only be described as a guttural coughing noise. Several feet away from him was an elderly-looking fisherman preparing a small boat, large enough to accommodate 2 or 3 people tops, while also looking rather old and worn down. Despite this, it was Naruto's only way to the island of Yuzashigakure. "Just to let you know, kid, I'll only take you halfway," the fisherman warned while preparing his vessel. "You're one of them shinobi freaks though, so I'm sure you'll somehow make it the rest of the way." Naruto nodded, as quite honestly he could simply walk across the water the entire way if he felt that was his only option. The only reason he was taking a boat was because he wanted someone experienced with these particular waters to serve as somewhat of a guide. This was his first trip away from the village, so he was going to be as careful as possible. "Very well," Naruto commented in agreement. "I would like to head out immediately." The fisherman frowned before muttering to himself while finishing his final preparations. He had been apprehensive at the prospect of sailing at night, but with the extra payment, he finally agreed. For whatever reason, he was abnormally terrified at the idea of sailing anywhere near Yuzashigakure, and spoke about the place in a nervous, hushed whisper. He clicked his yellow teeth before making a sweeping motion with his arm. Fine. Get in the damn boat already then." Naruto was quick to do as he was told, and the 2 unlikely travel companions were out at sea. It was so dark that Naruto could hardly see in any direction, so he was forced to activate his Sharingan. The action seemed to make the fisherman nervous, likely because the crimson eyes glowing in the dark were almost demonic in nature. "So, any particular reason you want to go to that island?" the fisherman asked before correcting himself. It seemed that he figured trying to be civil towards the kid with the demon red eyes was a good idea. Naruto inclined his head slightly. "Knowledge," was all he said, which made the fisherman scoff a bit. "Then you'd be just like those Uzumaki folk," he explained. "That's all they cared about, knowledge, learning, junk like that. They were scholarly types, I suppose." Actually finding this new piece of information to be useful, Naruto decided to keep the conversation going. "He seemed to know a bit about them, so please tell me what happened to the Uzumaki clan," he asked, causing the fisherman to tense up a bit. It was one of the great mysteries of the shinobi world. How did one of the most renowned and respected clans merely disappear from the face of the earth? Nobody knew what happened, only that one day, the people of Yuzashigakure no Sato ceased to exist. Many tried to investigate, but none had been able to breach through the intricacies of the Uzumaki clan's defenses. "I know nothing about that," the fisherman quickly responded, his tone hurried and on edge. Naruto's eyes narrowed. In all honesty, he felt that the fisherman knew more than he was letting on, and he subtly channeled more chakra to his eyes. He felt bad about using it against an innocent person, but he needed answers. Besides, this wasn't harmful, as it merely made a person more inclined to reveal their true thoughts. "Speak your thoughts," Naruto calmly commanded, and the fisherman's demeanor relaxed, and his eyes lost focus. "As I said, I don't really know anything," he confessed. "All I remember is that night, one just like any other. The Uzumaki had sent a messenger early in the day to tell us to stay out of the waters. Then, while we were all sleeping, it happened. The wind then began to pick up, generating an eerie howling sound, and rocking the boat in the water. The small sail of the boat fluttered due to the force, and Naruto had to use his hands to keep his hair from obscuring his vision. After waiting for the wind to die down, Naruto spoke again. "Continue," he said. The fisherman's eyes became even more unfocused as he took further route. "I was sleeping in my shack like I always did at that time, and then the sky, it bled red like blood. It churned my insides, and made me puke out my guts just by looking at it. It felt like I was seeing something I wasn't supposed to see, you know." Naruto frowned and released resulting in the fisherman shaking his head, as if freed from a daze. With that explanation, he was left with more questions than answers. What caused the sky to become red? What caused the Uzumaki to essentially disappear? He still didn't have an answer for any of those questions. "We'll be getting halfway soon," the fisherman mumbled, still experiencing the after effects of the. Naruto nodded. "Thank you." Eventually, they reached the point where the fisherman refused to go any further, so Naruto was forced to step off of the boat and stand atop the water, as if it was solid ground. Without another word, he began walking toward where he knew the island to be. It was a strange experience, as due to the darkness of the night, the ocean looked like a black miasma. It was easy to figure out why people didn't like sailing out here at night. It took a little while, but eventually, he saw something in the distance. At first, it was just a shadow in the distance, then an undefinable shape, and finally, he managed to see it fully for what it was. As he was finally close enough, standing before it, there was little doubt in his mind that this was Yuzashigakure no Sato. The structures on the island were marvelous, to say the least, but they were all clearly in a state of disrepair, due to decades of being left unattended to. Funny enough, the closer he got to the village, the more he realized that it was built upon 2 islands, not a single one, with both sides being connected by a bridge. "No signs of any conflict here," Naruto mumbled to himself. Still, he was only investigating from a distance, so he was bound to learn more once he entered the confines of the village. After searching around for a bit, he managed to find what appeared to be the village's main entrance. Two massive stone doors were what separated Uzoshiogakure from the rest of the world, and after today, human eyes would be set upon its wonders once again. Now standing before the grand entrance, he placed his hands on the doors, and pushed with all of his might. It didn't budge, not even slightly. He channeled chakra through his body to augment his physical strength, and still didn't manage to get any further. After his second attempt, he realized that the doors may just be too heavy to push through, and weave through a set of hand seals. Earth-style. Subterranean voyage. He sank below the ground, deciding that going under the wall was always a possibility if the doors refused to budge. Making sure to advance forward far enough to rise up on the other side of the wall, he then burst out of the earth, hoping to find himself at the center of the village. However, his eyes widened when, despite all logic, he found himself to still be facing the very same sealed entrance. I was certain I traveled under the wall, he thought to himself. His eyes narrowed, as a possible explanation came to mind. Deciding to test his new theory, he then took to the air, leaping over the wall, and landing on the other side. As he predicted, despite clearly jumping to the other side, he found himself landing in front of the massive doors once more. Genjutsu, he commented resolutely. Clearly, an illusion was interfering with his senses and spatial awareness. He reactivated his Sharingan, and upon doing so, something immediately changed. The doors were now revealed to have a single piece of paper stuck at their center. Naruto approached this paper to see what it said, and saw that it was covered in indecipherable scrawl, with the kanji for blood written at the center. Naruto stared at it for several minutes, trying to get as best of an understanding of it as he could before reaching a conclusion. Clearly, it was a seal meant to keep people from entering the village. With his Sharingan activated, he was actually able to see a sphere of transparent chakra surrounding the village. Working in tandem with an advanced, it was enough to keep even elite shinobi out. Blood, Naruto said aloud, reading the kanji. Deciding to side with his gut instincts, he removed the kunai from his weapon pouch, and made a small cut in his thumb. He then dragged his bleeding thumb along the length of the paper, and waited for something to happen. It took a while, but then the door began to groan, almost as if it were a person trying to move their body after extended immobility. They opened entirely on their own, and, as they did, Naruto wondered what he would see. The rational part of him expected signs of violence, death, and decay, whereas, another part imagined a still fully functioning society hidden within. What he saw, however, was nothing. There was no destruction, no signs of battle, nothing other than the eerie scent of death. As he ventured through the entrance, and into the village, he felt as if he was treading upon forbidden ground. The village, vast, and once bustling with life, was now so silent, and the vile stench of death permeated through the air. It was an assault on the senses. Where should I even begin? Naruto thought to himself before pressing onward. His reason for traveling to such a faraway land was to learn more about Jinchuriki. Without it, Jinchuriki wouldn't even exist, and there were no more celebrated experts of recorded history than the Uzumaki clan. Hell, even the very seal that kept the Kyuubi at bay and his sister, was of Uzumaki origin. So, in his opinion, to better understand Jinchuriki, understanding the Uzumaki, and their methods was an excellent first step. He decided to push toward the center of the village. Currently, he was on the right side of the village located on the right island, and if he wanted to explore the left, he would need to access the bridge. Based on what he could see just by looking at it from a distance, living in the left portion of the village was a privilege afforded to those of high wealth and status. The buildings were larger, and appeared to be of a higher quality, and at the center, there was a massive beautiful tower that was a testament to the architectural genius of his ancestors. He reached what could only be described as the town square, and was forced to come to an abrupt halt. For the first time since coming here, he found something. Corpses numbering in the hundreds were all strewn about, men, women, children all. The smell they generated nearly forced Naruto to vomit, but he steeled himself before looking at the horrid scene with a more analytical eye. Oddly enough, none of the bodies showed any injuries of any kind yet, they all appeared to be mummified. He racked his mind for anything that could serve as a cause for such a bizarre phenomenon, but found nothing. As he continued to stare on in morbid fascination, everything around him suddenly went black, as if his vision was stolen. Then, a voice echoed through his mind, if it could even be described as a voice at all. It spoke in his tongue, but it sounded more like an inhuman entity attempting to mimic human speech. It was the most disturbing sound he had ever heard. Your eyes have yet to open. As soon as he heard the voice in his mind, he gripped his head in agony, and fell to his knees. He felt as if his bones were being crushed within his body, and his head was plagued by what could only be described as the worst feeling imaginable. Blood began pooling on the ground beneath him, and he quickly realized it was dripping from his eyes and ears. What is happening to me? He thought to himself, gritting his teeth through the agony. It was the only thing that kept him from screaming. To top it all off, he couldn't keep it in anymore, and vomited all over the ground. Eventually, the sharp pain became a dull ache, a throbbing of the brain, a stinging of the eyes, and a creaking of the bones. Once again he was able to see, but his vision was obscured due to the blood that had begun pooling in his eyes. It took all of his strength to rise to his feet once more, and he only managed to do so on shaky legs. Despite his condition, he was able to notice when a presence appeared behind him. Turning around, his blurred vision afforded him enough perception to be able to see what seemed to be a shadowy phantom raging toward him. Acting only on his developed battle instinct at this point, he was able to move back quickly enough to avoid a slash that would have surely killed him. The phantom spoke, though the words were muffled due to Naruto's injured ears, though it was clear that the individual was female. His knees buckled under the weight of his body, and in an attempt to better understand his situation, he wiped his eyes with his sleeve. Upon doing so, his vision improved drastically, and he was face to face with a beautiful young woman. He noticed first the long, straight, blonde hair bound with taut bandages, then a set of dark eyes, and finally red lipstick. But his eyes narrowed when he saw that she wore the standard Kumagakure forehead protector. "You don't look so good," she asked with a cat-like grin, though he only heard the half end of it, as his hearing returned just in time. "Naruto Uzumaki. I've been following you for some time." Naruto found himself struggling to even breathe. "You aim to kill me?" he said, asking the obvious question. She grinned, licking her lips like a predator. "That is the plan." The two blondes stood face to face, one looking tall and confident, and the other looking, as if merely standing was becoming a struggle. Naruto's arms were hanging limply at his sides, as he desperately gasped for air. Yujito, on the other hand, rested comfortably on her hip, as she yawned mockingly. "I almost feel bad killing you, as you are now," Yujito taunted. "Had your condition been any better, I'm sure you would have put up quite a fight. That is, if you're as skilled as people say you are." Naruto wasn't sure what was going on with him, but it was quite clear that merely hearing that voice in his mind was enough to completely ravage his body, almost like an invasive toxin. He was unsure why it had such an effect on him, but he was sure of one thing. Such a voice was not meant to be heard by human ears. "You were sent by Kumagakure?" Naruto asked after managing to get his breathing under control. Yujito nodded, clearly proud of her village. "That's right, filth. You humiliated Lord Drakeage, so you should have expected retribution." "All I did was save a 3-year-old girl from being kidnapped," Naruto countered tiredly. "If your Drakeage is the type of person to order such a thing, then you'd have to be morally bankrupt to serve him at all." "What does that say about you then?" Yujito frowned upon hearing his point. Her nails and teeth both elongated, and Naruto could practically feel the powerful chakra radiating from her body. Naruto activated his Sharingan, which allowed him to get a better view of her chakra as a whole. It was potent, and while not as vast in quantity as his own, it reminded him of someone he knew. "You're?" Naruto asked calmly, only causing Yujito to get even more aggravated. "I'm Yujito Nai." She spat in response before her chakra flared to even greater proportions, distorting her voice. "And I've had enough talking for today." Immediately after finishing, she blurred out of sight in a flash of speed. Naruto's Sharingan allowed him to see enough of her movements, which allowed him to dodge just in time. As he slid back in the other direction, he took note of her nails. They were now nearly a foot long in length, and glistened in the moonlight like razor-sharp knives. With every second her chakra grew more and more powerful, as did her fury. It soon became clear that there was no reasoning with a person like this, and despite his harrowing physical condition, he would need to dig in his heels and fight. Right, as he finished that thought, she blurred in speed once more, though this time it was much faster than before. He then felt his ribs creak, as if on the brink of snapping, as he was hit with a vicious kick. The force of the strike was so great that he was actually sent flying into the stone wall of one of the nearby buildings, knocking the wind out of his lungs. Not a Uzumaki for nothing though, Naruto was quick to rise from his precarious position, and avoid a falling axe kick that actually left cracks in the street below. Looking at his once very beautiful opponent, he noted that she now looked as if she were possessed. Her face was contorted in inhuman fury, and her eyes belated almost barbaric psychopathy. "You're good at running," she shrieked before disappearing in speed once more. He saw nothing. As he waited for the inevitable pain, he cursed himself. Years of training had brought him to this point, and despite it all, he still found himself facing an opponent that was overmatching him. To be fair to himself, he was quite literally half her age, and unlike her, he wasn't capable of using the power of a Bijuu, but still. His instinct screamed at him, and he looked to his right to see his opponent preparing to kill him, with her blade-like nails poised to pierce through his skull. He had always thought it was ridiculous when people in stories lamented about seeing their lives flash before their eyes before death. However, now, a part of him understood. Except in this moment, in this brief instant of time, all I could think about was the promises he had made throughout his life. As the killing blow inched toward him, he was finally able to see. It wasn't that she appeared any slower, rather, in the subtle movements in which she exerted her strength, he was vividly able to see an image of her next move. Due to this sudden change, he was able to tilt his body back, fast enough to narrowly avoid death. Vegito had put all of her weight into what she had assumed would be the finishing blow, and therefore, she lost her balance, nearly falling forward onto her face. Falling soon became the least of her worries, however, when she felt a kick land against the side of her head with pinpoint precision, causing her to be knocked back several feet, bouncing on the hard cobblestone ground like a stone skipping on water. How was he able to? She mumbled after getting back to her feet. Her eyes then widened as she noticed a change in her opponent. The very same crimson eyes stared back at her, but now, there were 3 Tomo in each eye instead of 2. Naruto, on the other hand, looked on toward the enraged Jinchuriki with more clarity than he had ever been afforded before. It didn't take a genius to realize that his Sharingan had taken the final step in its evolution. The 3rd Tomo, the point in which all of the Sharingan abilities reached peak form. Rather than just being able to see things more clearly, he was now able to fully predict the movements of whomever he was fighting. I have things that I still have to do, Naruto calmly explained, his eyes narrowing. People are counting on me, so I cannot die here. I apologize, but you will fail in your mission. Vegito grinned psychotically in response before lowering herself to the ground, standing on all 4s like a cat. As it had been for the entirety of their brief bout, her chakra increased in ferocity, so much so that it became visible. Blue chakra swirled around her, actually causing a breeze, as it fluctuated in the air. I must admit, for a kid you aren't all that bad, Vegito complimented, though her tone was demeaning. But nobody who has ever pushed me this far has ever lived. So, I'm afraid. Halfway through her sentence, the ground cracked underneath her, and she launched herself toward him faster than most could blink. You're dead. She finished once she was in range. Surprisingly, she met no resistance, and her clawed hand pierced straight through his chest. As the blood spattered across her face, her grin only increased in size. She had done it. Just like all of the other missions she had been on before, she felt the warm blood of her enemy decorating her face and body. It was a glorious feeling. She made sure to look at her victim's face, taking in every detail, as the blood began pouring from his mouth. The part of her that would have felt bad about killing a young child had left her long ago, so all she felt was utter glee. Nothing could possibly get in the way of the euphoria she was experiencing. Fire style. Dragon flame bombs. Upon hearing the voice, her eyes widened, and she quickly turned over her shoulder to see Naruto standing behind her, completely unharmed, preparing a turning back around. She saw the Naruto she had just pierced fade away into nothing. Shit, she thought to herself hurriedly. A torrent of flames was then spewed from Naruto's mouth, and approached the dazed Jinchuriki with blinding speed. She was unable to react in time, and was engulfed almost instantly. Naruto stood across from the blazing inferno, which along with Vegito's shrieks of agony, was fairly loud due to the roaring of the flames. As he waited for the results of his to be laid bare, he lifted his hands, and looked down upon them. He felt like a completely different person now. His perception, it was unlike anything he had ever experienced before with the previous stages of his Sharingan. Now he knew how Lord Fugaku, and the other elite fighters of the Uchiha perceived combat with their eyes. It almost felt unfair for those who hadn't been born with the eyes of the Uchiha clan. It didn't take very long for the flames to die down, and when they did he saw his opponent face down on the ground, struggling to bring herself up to her feet. Her hair was singed, and her skin was littered with several severe burns that would need medical attention soon, otherwise they'd leave permanent scarring. You cannot continue, and still hope to live, Naruto commented. I have no desire to take your life. Surrender now, and I will allow you to leave. In an unexpected move, his words only served to amuse Vegito, who began to laugh. Her back trembled, as the eerie laugh escaped her lips, echoing throughout the surrounding area. Naruto remained unaffected, despite the fact that what he was witnessing was something that would make an ordinary person step back and worry. Why you let me go? She asked rhetorically. The prey doesn't allow the predator to leave. The predator leaves when it's eaten. That's how things work in this world of beasts. Naruto could only look on at what he viewed as a victim of the shinobi system. One did not come to such conclusions on their own, someone had to have conditioned her to see the world the way she did. It made Naruto feel pity, looking down at this person who could have very well lived a normal life, had she not been forced to become a professional murderer. With no discernible physical reaction, Naruto said, "You and I are not beasts, we are human," he said, pointing out the fatal flaw in her philosophy. We possess the mental capacity to push past our baser instincts. It is what allows us to nurture and care for others, even when it means putting ourselves at risk. That is what separates us from other animals, the ability to find greater purpose in life, one beyond merely surviving. Only silence followed. The kind of foreboding silence that could only occur when someone's worldview was questioned. Naruto could practically hear the gears turning in Yujito's head. It was very likely that this was the first time someone had ever decided to point out why her worldview was incorrect, either because they felt it was pointless, or because they couldn't care to do so. "You're wrong," she growled. "You're still young, but one day you'll come to see the world for what it really is. The more death you witness, the more blood you spill, the line between man and beast will become blurred, until you eventually reach the very same place that I have." Naruto simply waited for her to finish. His body was still recuperating, and every moment he could stall would increase his chances of survival, should she decide to continue this fight. Vegito grinned at him, as she brought herself back to all fours, a place of acceptance, she continued. I've come to accept that this is the way that human beings truly are. And, if we truly are mere beasts of slaughter, then I may, as well become the most dangerous of them all, the apex predator. Deciding that talking was now pointless, Naruto activated a pair of summoning seals on his wrists, and 2 shuriken appeared in his hands at the blink of an eye. Faster than most could track, Naruto unleashed a barrage of metallic death, flinging shuriken after shuriken. To her credit, Yujiro remained defensive, either dodging or using her elongated nails to parry the assault. You seem to be taking this seriously, she taunted before pausing her words to lean back and avoid a shuriken that would have pierced her skull. Where's all your humanity now? You don't seem all that hesitant to kill me. Naruto ignored her, fire style. Phoenix Flower Jutsu, he said after weaving through a set of hand seals, faster than the eye could see. Upon doing so, a multitude of miniature fireballs were expelled from his mouth. However, he put a twist on them by simultaneously throwing shuriken, as well, resulting in balls of flames with shuriken spinning dangerously at their center. How fun! Yujiro remarked, before she jumped into the air, and avoided the danger. Naruto was then forced to take a momentary defensive approach, when what appeared to be tiny balls of blue fire were expelled from Yujiro's mouth like spit. At the center of all of the flaming projectiles, he could see hair in the shape of mice, which were engulfed entirely in blue flame. They all came speeding toward him with precision. He dodged, but was surprised when the attack he avoided changed course, and came roaring toward him once more. They home in on their target, he thought to himself before turning, and jumping in the other direction. He weaved through the various roads and alleyways of Uzashigakure, all the while doing his best to maintain a distance between himself and the flaming mouse hairballs that seemed to be inching closer and closer by the second. To make matters worse, with every moment that went by, the hairballs appeared to multiply, increasing in number. Earth style. Mobile Core, Naruto announced, his hands forming the seal of the snake while he was still moving. Immediately after, a portion of the ground rose behind him, as he continued to sprint on, resulting in many of the hairballs making contact, and exploding. Several hairballs managed to avoid the earth core, and continue on toward their target. Naruto took to the air, spinning, and rotating with grace and dexterity, narrowly avoiding the flaming projectiles. Realizing that dodging wouldn't cut it, Naruto created a shadow clone, grabbed its arm, and tossed it into the remaining mouse hairballs. He then fell safely toward the ground, watching, as his clone was engulfed in flames. Before he could reach the ground, however, he was forced to flip backward mid-air to avoid another blitzing attack from Yujiro, who seemed hellbent, and cut him to shreds with her claws. Finally, landing securely on the ground, Naruto turned to face his opponent. They two stood off for several moments. No one has ever given me a fight like this, Yujiro commented with a grin. No wonder Lord Reikage wants you dead. Naruto merely stared at her. You talk quite a bit, he responded, causing her to grit her teeth in frustration. Her anger then quickly turned to glee. Bye-bye, she taunted Naruto's brief confusion. Before he could react, a pair of hands erupted from the ground and gripped his ankles in a vice. Looking down, he quickly recognized that they were Yujiro's. She created a clone, he observed, as the original Yujiro came speeding toward him. It seemed she was more capable of strategy than he had initially given her credit for. Much like she had earlier, she attempted to stab his chest with her claws. This time, however, her hands were grabbed by Naruto, mere millimeters before they would have reached his flesh. A battle of wills ensued, in which both parties exerted themselves to their max strength, with Yujiro trying her damnedest to push her nails into his flesh, and Naruto doing his best to prevent her from doing so. You can't resist forever, Yujiro taunted. Every second my chakra gets stronger and stronger. I can play this game all day. Naruto's grip on her wrists tightened. His calm expression only served to confuse Yujiro, his eyes narrowed in suspicion. Before she could even begin to ask what he was planning, she heard an odd sound above her. Looking up, her eyes widened in shock when she saw another Naruto falling from the air above her, holding a sphere of blue rotating chakra in his right hand. What is that? She thought to herself in horror. She tried to get away, but Naruto gripping her wrists wouldn't allow her. Before she could acknowledge the irony of the trap she had planned ending up being her undoing, Naruto falling toward her rammed the strange sphere of chakra into her back. The power behind the attack was massive, tearing and grinding into her flesh. Such was the force that Yujiro was slammed into the stone ground below her, resulting in the area surrounding her being crushed. The Naruto that had been holding her in place disappeared in a cloud of smoke, revealing himself to have been a shadow clone. The real Naruto, who had just used the Rasengan in battle for the first time, looked down at his wounded opponent. She was bleeding profusely, and based on what he could see it was clear that many of her bones would require mending. Thankfully, she was now unconscious, so he could move on without having to worry about getting attacked. Pausing for a moment, he looked around him at the once bustling city of Uzashigakure, and sighed. I came here for knowledge, and was only met with conflict, he thought to himself in disappointment. Out of his line of sight, behind him, Yujiro was experiencing a change. Her skin began peeling off, revealing a dark red, nearly black, layer of chakra underneath. As the process continued, Naruto quickly became aware of the massive increase in chakra behind him, and looked toward the unconscious Yujiro with alarm. The chakra he was feeling now was in a completely different league than what he had felt earlier. So this is the power of the Nibi, he thought. It must be using her weakened state as an opportunity to escape. Soon, her entire body was encompassed by the blood-red chakra, until she looked nothing like a human at all. Her eyes were replaced by large glowing circles, and her mouth was now a maul with a similar glow, as if inside she was housing some incredible energy. There was no longer any human intelligence there. He was no longer face to face with Yujiro, but rather, the Nibi influencing her unconscious body with its chakra. In the presence of such potent untamed chakra, Naruto began to wonder if he would have any chance at all against such a foe. He was still just a child, a genin, after all. Then, he remembered what Jiraiya had revealed to him. Genjutsu, he remembered. I can suppress the chakra of the Nibi using my Sharingan. I just need to find the opportunity. Before he could finish his thought, Yujiro disappeared at a speed greater than he had ever witnessed before. Then, he saw crimson, and quickly looked down to see that blood was spurting from a wound in his side. His eyes widened, as he realized he had been attacked before he could even blink. Despite the pain of the injury, and the blood dripping down his side, Naruto created distance by jumping back several feet. Yujiro was now entirely like a beast, her vision darting around in all directions, looking for something, anything, to kill. She was no longer a person with the sole objective to kill him. She was now a monster that wanted to slaughter anything in sight. Soon, her eyes set on him, and he racked his mind over what's next course of action should be. This time, he was more prepared, and his Sharingan was able to track her movements, as she blurred toward him with astonishing speed. However, when he tried to move, he felt his body racked with intense pain, and realized that the injury to his side was far more dangerous than he had initially thought it to be. I can't move, he realized, as the unstable Jinchuriki came barreling towards him. Thankfully, right before Yujiro could make contact with him, a massive mallet of red glowing chakra slammed down on her, crushing the ground below. Naruto immediately recognized him, and looked up toward the nearby rooftops to see Toneri giving him a casual wave. Hello, Naruto, he greeted me with his signature smile. How are you? Naruto, breathing heavily due to blood loss, used all of his strength to jump into the air, and land on the roof at Toneri's side. For once, he was pleased to see his teammate. I could be better, Naruto responded, before looking down toward the hammer of red chakra that was pinning Yujiro to the ground. That won't be able to hold her for long. Toneri's expression became a bit more serious. I know, he acknowledged. Almost, as if on cue, the chakra mallet was obliterated by the sheer magnitude and potency of the Nibi's chakra. Naruto and Toneri both got into lowered stance, as they prepared for a possible incoming attack. With someone at his side, Naruto was feeling more confident about his chances, but was once again reminded of his injury, when he felt a painful pulsating sensation on his side. How do we defeat such an enemy, Naruto? Toneri asked, looking toward his teammate. We are not yet strong enough to fight such foes, and you are injured. After a bout of heavy breathing, Naruto explained, I need to find an opportunity to put it under me, he explained. Do you have any that can restrain it? Toneri seemed to think for a moment before responding, I do, but, as you can see, it is able to overpower my tool creation jutsu fairly quickly. A brief second of eye contact is all I need, Naruto assured. Nodding in understanding, Toneri turned to face the confused Jinchuriki down below them. It was scanning the area, looking for anything that may serve as prey. It was clear that Naruto's injury would make a drawn-out fight impossible. The only way they could subdue this beast would be for Naruto to use his Sharingan, and if he were to lose consciousness due to blood loss before that happened, they'd both die. Deciding to be gutsy, Toneri jumped from his elevated position, and landed directly in front of Yujiro, much to Naruto's surprise. Before he could issue a warning, Toneri clapped his hands together, and barred chains made of pure red chakra rose out of the ground, wrapping around Yujiro, and retraining her. She writhed and struggled, pushing the chains to their limits, as it seemed they could snap at any moment. And now, Naruto. Toneri shouted, the strain of his causing sweat to trickle down his forehead, as he kept his hands together. Not needing to be told twice, Naruto leaped from the rooftop, landing directly in front of the struggling Yujiro, who looked at him with beastly curiosity, as she momentarily stopped struggling. Naruto used this as his moment, and made eye contact with the rampaging Jinchuriki. His Sharingan eyes spun hypnotically, and Yujiro froze almost instantly. Slowly, but surely, the chakra around her began to fade away until she was back to her normal state, still wholly unconscious. Naruto and Toneri both were relieved, with the latter allowing the chakra chains to disappear, ending the immense strain on his chakra reserves. We did it, Naruto, said Toneri with a smile. Naruto didn't respond, as he fell face first onto the ground, having finally lost too much blood to stay conscious. When his eyes fluttered open, he felt like he was in a daze. He stared up at a wooden ceiling, and took note of the fact that he was resting on the ground. Naruto brought himself to a seated position, quickly noticing that his shirt had been removed, and that bandages were wrapped around his sides. You lost a lot of blood, Naruto. You should rest and move as little as possible. Naruto recognized the voice, so he felt no surprise when he saw Toneri sitting cross-legged at his side. For once, Naruto found a bit of comfort in Toneri's presence, the kind he had only experienced before when spending time with Izumi. It was a feeling of friendship, of camaraderie. How long has it been? Naruto asked while cradling his side. Toneri looked forward, toward a roaring fireplace at the other end of the room. Only 24 hours, he answered. Naruto nodded tiredly before slumping back down to lay on his back. His body felt utterly sapped of energy, and he quickly realized that his chakra had likely been going haywire over the past hours, doing its best to heal him. I sent a clone to take the Kamagakure Jinchuriki far away, Toneri said, speaking again. I figured it wouldn't be a good idea to leave her in Uzashigakure. Naruto's body was racked with a bit of pain, as he remained still. Where are we now? He asked. I took you back across the water to the fishing village, Toneri explained with a smile. They had doctors here that were able to treat your wounds. They said they had never seen a healing factor like yours before, and that most people would have died from such an injury. But we both know that you are anything but normal. Naruto stayed silent, trying to relax. Months ago, he would have never trusted Toneri enough to allow himself to completely rest in his presence. However, seeing as he had just risked his life to help him defeat the Nibi Jinchuriki, Naruto felt that the least he could do was give him his trust. You followed me to Uzashigakure? Naruto asked, realizing that was the only way he could have arrived to help him in time. Toneri appeared sheepish, and scratched the back of his head. Well, yes. I know that you told me not to follow you anymore, but I figured traveling alone would be really dangerous after everything that is happening between the village and Kamagakure. So, I apologize for. Before he could finish, he was interrupted. Toneri. Yes, thank you. Silence reigned, as Naruto finally allowed himself to fall back to sleep. Toneri on the other hand, looked down at his teammate with a smile. It was different from his usual grin, more genuinely happy. Naruto had essentially just acknowledged him, giving him his thanks, and trusting him enough to sleep in his presence. You're welcome, Naruto. Thanks for watching my video. Leave a like if you enjoyed my video, and also do consider subscribing to my channel for more awesome content. See you next time, till then sayonara.